Hello everyone. Welcome to everyone. So good to see all of you joining us this afternoon for our first online Ask Me Anything session. In case you missed it, Antler is currently accepting applications for upcoming residency kicking off in February next year, and we are here today to answer any of your burning questions about the residency, about Antler, and the founder's journey. First off, I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land in which we meet today. As for me, I'm dialing in from the land of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation in Naarm, Melbourne. I would also like to pay my respects to elders, past and present, and extend that respect to any Indigenous traditional owners of the land present today in our online session. So thank you for dialing in across Sydney, Melbourne, and I believe Brisbane. So today's session is again designed to highlight why is a day zero Antler investor your best bet. We'll delve into it in a little bit. As for those of you who I haven't had a pleasure to meet yet, I'm Rani. I'm manager at Antler across program and scouting functions, but also in the call Liam, our scouting manager based in Sydney, as well as Rachel, our senior program manager based in Sydney as well. This afternoon, we are joined with not one, but two of our portfolio company founders who've built and launched their companies with us, Katie from Fobo and Nate from Shopfront. We'll have a conversation with them later, but what's the agenda for the next hour? So I'll start with covering our bases with a bit of introduction to Antler. I believe most of you are familiar with us already, but I'll still introduce a bit about us and how we support founders. And then we'll dive into a conversation with Katie and Nate with plenty of opportunities for you to ask your questions. Also to let everyone know, this is just the first of our AMAs, and we'll actually have more in the coming months until February to shed more light on the diversity of experience and profile of founders with back in Antler and their journey. We also have a fortnightly lunch Ask Me Anything sessions with our general partner, James McClure, to give you access to directly ask your questions to those making the investment decisions. I believe there should be a link on the chat box there to register to our upcoming AMA sessions. Before we kick off, just some general housekeeping. At any point of the conversation today, feel free to address your questions or comments on the comment section. We'll also have dedicated time for Q&A to answer any of your burning questions later on. Please mute yourself if you're not speaking, just to avoid any background noise. And if possible, please keep your camera turned on so we can see who we're speaking to. All right, now a bit about Antler. So Antler is the world's day zero investor, backing founders from day zero to greatness. And we mean it when we say we back them from day zero to greatness, because not only we invest the first inception capital, but we actually follow on our investments up till Series C. In Australia, we launched in 2019, and since then we have seen more than 1,000 founders came through our residency programs. We've invested in more than 300 founders across more than 145 portfolio companies, and we are currently present and run our residency programs in Sydney, Melbourne, and for the first time ever in Brisbane coming February. We are truly Australia's only global VC. We're actually also one of the most active early stage investors globally. We're currently present in 27 locations, and we've also invested in over 1,000 startups globally. So how do we support founders from day zero? So we run residency program, 2 intakes a year across Sydney, Melbourne, and for the first time ever, Brisbane next year. So when we run it, we build a cohort of inspiring, experienced founders across these 3 main archetypes. We know that human rarely fit nicely into boxes, but this is how we think about building a cohort. We think about building a melting pot across these three main archetypes. The tech and product builders, those with actual skill set to build the product, the solution. For example, you've got here a CDO and co-founder Rolla. She's a builder. She's spent 20 years in web application development and also an ex-CTO and software engineer in financial services, and currently a co-founder of a tech company in Rolla that we recently backed this year. We also onboard business and operators, so those in high levels of sales, growth role, exited founders as well. For example, Lars here was is a CEO and co-founder of Zillion, but also previously an exited founders and entrepreneurs with 20 years in software and technical products. We also onboard domain experts. So it looks like people who spend more than 10 years in a specific domain, so they know all the pain points. They are the right person, the right people to actually build in that domain. But also this could be the PhDs who spend years in like specific research area and they're looking to commercialize their expertise. For example, is Renee here, who spent 15 or so years in creative management in the arts and currently building in that space. Very exciting solution as well that we backed earlier this year. So founders join us from leading companies and institutions. We've actually attracted more tenured and experienced people with average work experience of 11 years. We also really proud that we have at least 38% companies with one women co-founder in our portfolio. We also attracted more than 50% serial entrepreneurs and more than 65 nationalities represented throughout the years that we run it in Australia. We back over 300 founders across 100 active companies, and these are just some of our front runners. Really diverse in terms of industries. I'm not going to dive too deep into that. We are agnostic, so we actually back founders before ideas are really founded first. We're agnostic in terms of verticals. That's why we have this very beautiful spread of portfolio across industries. Obviously, we back a lot of B2B and enterprise startups, but we also don't shy away from consumer play, for example, or ad tech or any other verticals. And obviously, we have two of our founders joining us today. So just a very big picture of how founder's journey with Antler looks like. So following rigorous screening process, we build a cohort of people that will then go through a 10 to 12 weeks residency with us. The residency itself consists of two distinct phases: the formation and validation and due diligence. Then following due diligence, you will then pitch for investment. Following our first check, we have a very hands-on portfolio support for at least your next 6 to 12 months. And part of it, we actually have introduced agreement for rolling capital, basically guaranteeing that Antler will follow on our first investment, committing to a third of your subsequent round, post Antler first round, as long as you manage to secure a minimum of 300K investment from sophisticated investors. So that's probably it about Antler. You have plenty of opportunities to ask us questions. But today, again, we are very much in honor to have Nate and Katie with us today to share about their founder's journey and for you to ask questions about their journey. To kick it off, Nate and Katie, can you please share a bit of a background or snapshot of your experience before joining Antler? Katie, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. Thanks, Rani and the Antler team for having me. I enjoy doing one of these. Rein me back in, Rani, when I talk too much. I love a panel discussion. So I'm Kshitija Deshmukh. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Fobo. We work with food and beverage wholesalers, and we help them automate their processes. We're starting with order management, with the North Star of wanting to help them reduce their errors, that leads to food waste. So we want to keep food out of landfill, essentially. So that's about what I do now. Bit about my background. Started off as a computer engineer many years ago. Decided to move into more business roles because I didn't want to sit in front of a computer all day. Little did I know that 15 years later, that's exactly what I'm going to be doing anyway. But from engineering, moved into more management consulting type of roles across a number of different industries. So, when you're a young consultant, you're sold as an expert on every project, and you get to do a wide variety of things. So I was able to get my hands in with the commercial side, go to market, strategy, change management. I dabbled in a lot of things. I'm a true generalist in that sense. But then just before starting Fobo, I spent about a little less than 5 years at Woolies. Worked in sort of the payments side of the business first, so commercializing that element. And then when COVID hit, moved into the wholesale part of the business. So that was one great thing that came out of COVID for me, was I found what I could do for the rest of my life. Because what I was working on was getting food to most vulnerable customers in Australia. And it became very salient for me of how challenging it is, how in Northern Territory, a banana is 3 times the price of Double Bay and maybe 20% of the economic opportunity. And so, yeah, with the sort of engineering and then sort of commercial experience coming together to then identify a problem that I found that I wanted to play a role in making food available and affordable. And that led to then starting Fobo.
Awesome. Thank you for that overview, Katie. We'll dive a bit into that in a little bit. Nate, what about you?
Yeah, hey guys, I'm Nate. Yes, I'm the co-founder of Shopfront. My background's a little bit weird. I spent 7 years at CBA, Commonwealth Bank, in various sort of roles in banking and relationship management, small business, etc. Then I moved to London for 4 years, and I got right into the startup scene there. So I was the first hire at an impact fintech, and that's where I kind of really started thinking about impact. When I moved back to Australia, I wanted to build something in impact again. I've always been a kind of reseller of sneakers and clothing, and so really wanted to build something in circular economy. And through a bunch of validation and interviews, we landed on the idea of Shopfront, and essentially we built a single platform where you can list your product with us, and it'll push out to eBay, Etsy, Depop, Shopify, whatever it might be. Basically trying to connect every seller, every marketplace, and every buyer globally long term. So in the early days of doing that, but yeah, it's a bit about me.
Awesome. Thanks, Nate. So both of you have sort of given an overview as well on your business, but let's dive a bit deeper into it. So first of all, what problem are you actually solving with your business, and how are you solving it? And what have you been up to these days? Business building, obviously. But yeah, maybe
Katie,
exciting.
Am I going first?
Yeah.
So
Katie,
the problem we're focusing on first in the food and beverage value chain is order management. So think a food and beverage wholesaler supplying big bags of food, so large quantities essentially, into food service or restaurants and cafes. A lot of that order management today happens over SMS, email, WhatsApp. So there's a challenge in people not moving towards e-commerce at the rate that we would want for business to be more efficient. So we're focusing on that. And then the way we solve it is we're deploying natural language processing to be able to understand and ingest an order from whatever channel a customer might send it. And then we bring it into the wholesalers, whatever system they might use, we push it into that. So it avoids them having to rekey those orders, which typically leads to error, leading to food waste. So we're helping them automate that space.
Yeah, and you already stopped making money since you launched your business with us last year, was it?
Yeah, a little over 12 months, I think.
Yeah.
And I come out of corporates, right? So this is my first startup gig. And when I used to meet founders then that were like a year into the journey, and I'm like, what are you doing for 12 months? Like, why aren't you making money? And now I know. But yeah, we've had a great journey. We've gone from, building letter of intents to building wait lists to now signing contracts. Product first version is ready and tested and live. So yeah, it's going well. And like we did sort of reprioritize, we pivoted maybe 3 weeks into Antler. I don't know, Rachel, if you remember. And then we've reprioritized a couple of times, like build something, didn't work, scrapped it, built again. So focusing now on sort of customer acquisition, evolving the product to get to different categories. And that's, heads down building and selling.
Nice, awesome, exciting stuff. Nate, what about you?
Yeah, so we identified that it takes about 15 to 20 minutes to list one product on one marketplace, like eBay or Depop, for example. If you're somewhat professional or do it a bit more than a hobby, this can be incredibly time consuming, like up to 2 or 3 hours a day. So we definitely saw that there was an automation opportunity there. We dive deep into that. And so what we're building is somewhat of an orchestration layer that sits between a seller and basically every marketplace globally. And through AI and complex API tools, we basically let that product taxonomy and attributes get listed across several marketplaces in under 2 minutes rather than kind of 15, 20 minutes, one product on one marketplace. So we're basically encouraging people to rethink what they do with their used goods and make it, the aim is to make it easier to sell your goods than it is to take them to the dump and throw them away and create some excitement in that space again. What was the second part to that question? Kind of where we're at now and traction and bits and things. Yeah, so we built a wait list, almost 400 people on the wait list. We only got funded a few months ago, so we started building a couple months ago, I think in July, and we've got a beta basically ready with integrations with Shopify, Depop, eBay, and Facebook Marketplace. So we'll be testing that out, and we're kind of battle testing that over the next couple months and slowly iterating. I've got a couple of enterprise partnerships on the go too. So yeah, like KD, we're just hustling and building, really. Don't think about anything else. So yeah, it's fun.
Well, it's really exceptional the pace you're building your business, Nate. If you think about it, you just joined Antler like early this year, and now you have your check, your money in the bank, and everything. Awesome. So maybe let's talk a bit more about your sort of like beginning and that turning point of you actually taking the leap into entrepreneurship. So Nate, you mentioned you were at CBA before, but we've also held multiple roles at startups and scale-ups in the UK particularly, and we're actually first hire in one of those. So at what point did you know you wanted to build your own venture, and why did you choose Antler to build it with? A bit of a
So yeah, as Rani said, I was the first hire at a fintech called Plend in the UK. So worked for these two first-time founders for free for about 6 months. Don't ask me why. It was a spur of the moment decision. It looked cool and fun at the time, but it was incredibly stressful in hindsight. But no, they took me on board full time when they raised their first round, and I basically led anything that they couldn't do. So somewhat of a founder associate. So for 3 years, I was incredibly close to being a founder. I just wasn't. In hindsight, probably should have tried to become a co-founder and had some equity there, but I was too silly and naive at that point in time. But I got a really good experience in how to handle kind of fundraising, objections from everybody because it's super early, and just how to grow and scale a business, a B2C business in a kind of sector or industry or space where that's quite difficult to do. And yeah, since following two first-time founders so closely for 3 years, I thought it's time to put on my big boy boots and start my own startup. And I actually think I interviewed with Antler 2 years before I actually joined. So I was like, I always had my eyes on Antler because I realized how difficult it was to actually get funding at such an early stage, especially if you're pre-product or pre-revenue, whatever it might be. It's so true that it's very hard to do that if you're not kind of in Antler or wherever else you go in terms of an accelerator. But Antler was just the most global. It was the most obvious choice at the time. The team was great, and yeah, I quickly realized 1 week in that it was a stressful but really good decision, and have zero regrets.
And I'm pretty sure it's as much
I wasn't paid to say that, by the way.
Excited.
That's my true thoughts.
Well, we pay you by the investments that we made in here. But thank you, Nate, for that. Katie, it's quite different for you because obviously you came from, again, corporate background, consultancy firm. So at what point did you know you wanted to actually venture out on your own and build your own company?
That I always knew, I think. I tried to do little things here and there, even when I was doing my engineering back in India. But I never really saw it through. Like something else came along and prioritized, I think, jobs. But even through my time in Australia, through the consulting firms, I constantly saw problems. But I never felt very passionately about want to quit my job and everything and be like, no, this is it. This is going to be my life. I think that only happened when I was in that sort of COVID period working on food security. So, and honestly, like, I think I realized the problem maybe 2 years before I actually gave it a go, or started with Antler essentially. So for me, why Antler was, I knew that I wanted to solve this problem. I didn't necessarily know the answer or didn't necessarily know how. But I think for me, because I did come in with a co-founder, so I did have a team when I came in. But I went with Antler because I knew, it just happened that someone I knew and sort of thought was quite good had taken the Antler path, and we were just chatting, and then he shared his experience a little bit, and I'm like, okay, that might be a good starting point. So I didn't have any network in startups, so to say. Like I had no clue in Australia in terms of what do you do, where do you start. Like from my consulting background, I'd have gotten there eventually, like what is the problem, how are we going to solve it, etc. But I thought it will be a good starting point given Antler will already have the network, etc. And then if you get a bit of pre-seed capital to get you going, then that was what was sort of valuable for me. And then the other thing I thought was, given that I don't have sort of that network or the know-how of startups, I wanted to get that fast, quickly through Antler. And then also just knowing that if Antler sort of vetted you and put money in you, then when you go to other investors, you've got some sort of credibility, I suppose, as a founder, because everyone knows that you watch people very, very closely. So it was almost like for me, I was like, it'll be like an Antler tick, and then when I go to do my next round, people will be like, yeah, okay, cool, like you went through that painful process. Good for you, but painful.
Awesome. Well, thank you for the Antler love, you both. Maybe Katie, a follow-up questions for you, because you came from a corporate background, but you always know you wanted to start something on your own. Is there anything, any sort of skill set or any sort of like tips or tricks from your old corporate days that you still sort of like, I guess, useful for you now that you're actually a founder?
What was the last part? Sorry, I didn't understand what the last part
Maybe
was.
like a specific skill set or anything that you still carry on from your corporate.
Oh, everything. All of my core skills.
Now that you're a startup founder.
I think what's really helpful is I'm a generalist. I can literally pick up anything and give it a go. I don't want to write code though, I make that very clear to my team, but pretty much everything else, like my co-founder Beth calls me a bush lawyer, because in a customer meeting I once said, let me check that with our chief legal officer, and then we get off the call and she's like, are you the chief legal officer? I'm like, yeah. So I think it's you have to wear many hats, and just given the diverse experience that I have working in different roles, working with tech people, working with marketing people is super helpful in bringing this together with limited resources. So there's always all of your skills that you build. I think you will have to tap into them at some point.
Awesome. Yeah, I asked a question because I'm pretty sure a lot of people in this call are currently maybe in a corporate role, thinking whether or not they're ready to take that leap to actually building something on their own. So thank you for sharing both. Maybe let's dive a bit deeper into your Antler residency experience. It's been a year or so for you, Katie. It's only been less than a year, maybe 8 months ago for you, Nate. Maybe you first, Nate, because it's a bit more fresh. Do you mind giving us a bit of an overview of your residency journey? with Antler. At what point did you actually team up with your co-founder, Drew? How did you know he's the one? At what point you actually validate your idea and track out? Just an overview of your Antler journey.
Yeah, so yeah, one tip I'd give everyone, like, I don't think you want to waste time in the residency, like finding who you're going to work with. You basically get put onto a hub I don't know if this is still going to be the case, but you get put onto a hub beforehand, and you can kind of see who's going to be in your cohort for like a month before you're in the program. So what I did was basically I'm non-technical. I don't know anything about coding, anything at all. So I basically looked for anyone semi-technical and reached out to all of them and had a call with all of them before the program started. And I nailed it down to like 3 or 4 potential CTO / co-founders. And on day one, I met Drew, and I was just like, "Yeah, stuff it. Let's just do it." We both kind of clicked on our calls and on day one. And then, yeah, we just hit the ground running. We shared a very flimsy deck after 1 week with the team and like the 60 people in the cohort, and got some pretty strong feedback. Thanks, Rachel. And yeah, from there, we kind of iterated the product and we went through the validation piece, which is probably the most stressful part of the residency, where you kind of have to, A, figure out if you like this person that you're working with, and B, figure out if there's enough of a problem for you to kind of tackle, and build a kind of VC scalable business out of. And I think if you're new to startups, start thinking about VC scalable, because like you very quickly realize that not every idea is a VC scalable idea, even if it's a good idea, which is a weird thing to kind of wrap your head around a lot of the time. But yeah, you just kind of interviewing people, talking to people, like you can shut down every couple of days. You have your ups, and then you kind of think it's the best idea ever, and then you take it to Antler and like, oh, don't know about this. Then you get brought down again, and then you kind of pick yourself back up. So yeah, that first 5 weeks, super critical. Drew and I actually failed the first pitch to get into the due diligence phase, which is the last phase. And to be honest, I thought that was the end of the road for us. I think that was probably one of the times where I spent the whole weekend sulking and thinking, what else can I do with my life? And was in a bit of a rut. And then on Monday, basically met Drew again in the office. Like, stuff it, let's just try again in 2 weeks and just revamp our whole pitch and revamp everything. And 2 weeks later, we came back with, I think it was a really good pitch for the amount of work we had done in the 2 weeks prior. And we completely pivoted the business and thought of something that was in the same space, but just, a lot more fine-tuned and a lot more easier to understand. Then, yeah, we passed that stage. And then the due diligence phase, which is the last 5 weeks, was pretty brutal. You get assigned a coach. You're really just trying to make sure you're on track to getting the funding in the 5 weeks ahead. And yeah, you're just really getting into the business nitty gritty, like setting up your business and setting everything up, making sure you have a proper business plan, all that sort of stuff. And then, yeah, you get to the IC, which is the final pitch in front of, I thought it was going to be like 5 people, but it was 15 people on the call, and some of them didn't even know who they were or what their names were, and their cameras were off, and it's a pretty daunting experience. And you're just going in blind. Rachel's got the timer. She's like, you got 10 minutes. I'm going to cut you off if you're not finished in 10 minutes. So yeah, you're literally like in a Shark Tank environment.
Never cut you off.
But
I was
in my mind, I thought you were going to cut me off. And then essentially, yeah, you find out pretty soon after if you get the funding. So yeah, I realized I went really into the detail there of the process, but that was basically what we went through. It was like you test your relationship with your co-founder, test your kind of own thinking. You're probably going to be tempted to give up a couple times, but then yeah, you just got to make it through and yeah, have conviction in yourself.
Love that. Well, thank you, Nate, for that very detailed overview. Seems like it's still fresh in the head right now. Maybe it feels like a lifetime ago. Okay, yeah, it's only a few months ago. But yeah, based on Nate's experience with us in Antler, you might heard a lot of no's from us, but in a lot of our cases, it's always like most of the no's are more so yes for later. And obviously Nate is super relentless and actually came back to us with more stronger validation and have proven their pace of execution. So thanks for that, Nate. Katie, do you still remember your residency journey with Antler?
Yeah, we really enjoyed our Antler experience. we were always like, I think we were like, the annoying two in the class were always first to pitch. I was writing to Rachel like 2 months before the cohort started and saying, hey, finished at Woolies. Can you give me a pass to work from somewhere? The cafe is not working really. So we were there way before our cohort started. Maybe I shouldn't publicly announce that. Do not reach out to get you in early.
Aren't you still there, KD?
Still there. Yes, hard to get rid of me. What we got, I think what stood out for me in the process was, because you're bound by time, you just have to go hard, get it done in 3 weeks, 5 weeks, and you just get to a certain outcome faster, I think, than you would have otherwise. Because what I think, there is a chance that without that sort of deadline, you might want to test it a bit more before you actually take the next step. So you're like, you reach a point where you're like, okay, it is what it is. This is what I know, and this is what I have to go ahead with. So I think that time-bound sort of structure was good. We got a lot out of the Antler team itself. Like, there's a lot of intellectual capital there. So I'd be open-minded with the questions they asked. You don't necessarily have to do everything that other people tell you to do, but we found value in questions they asked. So like, I remember we were the first ones to pitch, and then we got asked like these questions, and like, yeah, didn't think about that. Like, I'll come back tomorrow. So that happened quite a bit. But the whole process for us was like quite smooth. We went on from one thing to another. But we made sure that we were, I suppose you will get out of the program what you put into it. So there'll be lots of resources available, whether it's learning content or, they will run masterclasses and things like that. You'll have access, I think once you reach, I can't remember what the stages are called, but like when you reach the 5 week before IC, so DD, I think, you get assigned like a coach. I don't know if the process is the same, but that was fantastic for us. Like the partner that worked with us was really, really good, and really helped us refine where we got to in the end. I came in with the team, so I came in with my co-founder, but we had told each other, let's be open-minded. Like, if we meet someone and they're working on something else, and we feel like, both of us feel like we're going to like go our own way, we were still open to that. We're like, let's be like that, because there's going to be 90 other really smart people in the room. But we've worked together 10 years, so it was hard to sort of get to that sort of working chemistry with anyone else in that time, just because we know each other so well. But we still made it a point to meet everyone and talk to everyone. And yeah. So I think for us, it wasn't about finding the co-founder, but the process itself, and the questions that were asked that help us stretch our thinking.
Love that. I didn't know there was that agreement for you and Beth to be open to actually.
Yeah, we did say that. Yeah, we're like, if we like something else that someone else is working, we should give it a go.
All right. Well, thank you for sharing that, Katie and Nate. So I want to make sure that we actually have plenty of time for our attendees here to ask questions. So maybe let's give it to the floor if anyone has questions. I know that some of you have already popped it in the chat box, but feel free to raise your hand actually if you want to sort of just ask directly, and we can prompt you to unmute yourself and ask your question. Any questions from the floor? Yes, Sheena, feel free to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hello. Thank you so much, everybody, for everything you've put into this so far. KD, you mentioned, obviously, you went to the residency with your co-founder, and you had that agreement that if you found something else of interest, you could go your separate ways. My team is just me, so I'm trying to get my head around, I've got to go there, potentially go to a residency and find somebody else to work with. Is that a prerequisite? Is that, I mean, it's obviously an opportunity, but is that you have to work with somebody else? How does all of that relationship stuff work?
I think, so I went in with team, but when you get into Antler, the good thing is that you will meet a whole bunch of people that have come there with the intention to build a business. So it'll be about finding the right co-founder for yourself, and a number of things have to take. You need to find someone that has complementary skills and someone you think you can bear for the next 7 years at the minimum. But I don't think Antler will, I mean, ideally, that's the whole point, is for you to meet a whole bunch of people and be able to find a co-founder. But if you don't, they're not going to stop you from finding someone outside, so to say. Like, you know, if through the program, and maybe Rani, you're better to represent Antler.
Sure.
But
yeah, sure. Happy to chime in this one. Thank you, Sheena, for your question. So when you accepted to Antler, we accept you because we believe there's potential in you. We have conviction that you can build a business with us potentially, and for us to be able to back you. We accept you as individual founders. So when you come into the cohort, that's a very well-vetted cohort of, like, again, people from across these 3 main archetypes that I've shared. So basically, you're in the cohort to fill in a gap in your early stage startup journey, and that includes finding a co-founder. We invest in co-founding team. We super rarely invest in solo founder because we believe in complementary co-founding team. That's part of our thesis. So we strongly encourage you to actually build that complementary, strong co-founding team as part of the residency. Obviously, there's a preference for you to find that someone in the cohort because that's a cohort that we've already vetted. But if you find someone externally, there's always an opportunity for you to introduce them to us and for us to quickly sort of do a background check and vet them in for you to team up with.
So I guess the puzzle for me is everybody is coming along with their own idea of what they want to do. And obviously all of those ideas are going to work. But we go in with the intention that some of these ideas are going out the window and we're going to potentially work on somebody else's, or have somebody else come and work with us on ours. And that's the whole premise of the residency.
Yeah, it's always a mix. So some people actually come in without an idea. For example, most of the builders, people from the tech sort of like product building background, they came in because they have the skill set to build, and more likely than not, they actually team up with like the commercial sort of people who usually come in with the idea. So there's always sort of like a lot of opportunities for people to actually team up, because again, it's not only a mix of those 3 main sort of complementary archetypes that can together build a complete team, but also a mix of people coming in with an idea or without an idea.
Cool. All right, that's more clear now. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Sheena, for your question. Anyone else? Any other questions from the floor? Yes, Matt, please feel free to unmute yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Rani. I guess a question both to Nathan and Katie. How much has your idea changed from when you initiated the residency program until the end? Like, do you feel that it's how much did you pivot? Was it a 180? Was it a 90 degrees pivot? How married were you to your ideas?
I can go first if you want. Okay.
Sure, thanks.
Yeah, so we actually went in with this vision to build like a challenger marketplace. So like a market, think of like an eBay, but like a smarter, more intuitive version. Very generic idea. Obviously, that wasn't going to be the end case, but as we started validating, we quickly realized that buyers, so what one side of the marketplace doesn't have as many problems as the other side. So instead, we decided to fine tune the proposition to just the sellers instead. And that's how we went down the B2B route and of doing seller tooling rather than a marketplace. So it wasn't kind of too far from the original idea. It was kind of an isolated piece of the wider puzzle that we were trying to solve. But there was like a lot in between that, like a lot of different avenues that we were trying to hit and and quickly realize they weren't going to work. So I'd say the problem space more or less remained, but the product was very different.
It was the same for us, Matt. I'd say be obsessed with the problem. The solution is going to change many, many times. So for us, we reprioritize and sort of after the first pitch that evening. So still not tied to the solution. I'm still open to, better tech being available. It's evolving. We having to do new things, but what I would support what Nate said, that the problem is, as long as you love the problem and you know that it's a legit opportunity, a lot of times what can change a solution is whether customers will adopt it or not, whether it's usable or not, whether it fits in the environment or not. And then the other part is that's so usability. And then the second part is commerciality. The way you solve it, are you going to be able to scale it or not, sell it or not? So those kind of things will help define how you solve the problem.
Yeah, I'd probably give one bit of advice is not to like, rather than going, like, definitely go in without like if you're on the fence, go in with a problem, not a product, because if you're going with a product, you're going to just keep retrofitting a problem to the product, and it's just never going to work. Because going back to the VC backability thing, like the problem directly correlates to the scalability and like how big you can make this thing. And if you've just gone in with a product, you're not gonna, it's not gonna work that way. We learned that the hard way as well. Like I said, we went in with the marketplace idea and we tried to retrofit that. Instead, we took a step back and thought about the problem and then went back again.
And maybe the last, thank you both for your answers. Were very clear and extensive. The last kind of sub question is, how much has the residency program helped you refine your idea down to what it is today?
I can take this one, right? So they're not going to tell you what to do. No one's going to tell you what to do, but they will ask you questions that will challenge your thinking. Because at the end of the day, they're looking at, is this business investable? Are the founders going to make it happen, essentially? So if you say, my problem is X, and step 1, step 2, step 3 is how I'm going to solve it, they're not going to go do step 3 first or do step 1A, 2, 3. But they will ask you questions that will help you strengthen your proposition in terms of, and test your thinking really, and validation on whether your product is truly adding value. Whether it's going to be commercially viable, is it going to be good for the world? Those are sort of lenses that they will ask you questions on. So they will never dictate anything. They'll ask you questions.
Of course. So it's more of a kind of coaching stage, right? Where they will coach you through your own thinking process. Awesome. Thank you both for your answer.
Thank you. Anything you would like to add there, actually, Nate, before we move on to the next question?
Yeah, I think like at the end of the day, yes, like everyone in the Antler, everyone who's there to coach you is a very smart intellectual, and but you got to remember that they're like trying to help 60 or 90 now, however many people it is. So like the feedback you're going to get is sometimes like it's up to you to decipher what to do with that feedback. Like it's never just going to be, you should do this. Like there were so many times where it starts off with, have you thought about this? Or like, I've seen a company where X, and it's just more like that sort of thinking. So you got to have a bit of like humility to like just kind of understand where the problem is yourself. And I think that goes back to getting out what you put in, is just kind of making sure you are kind of attentive to all those little bits and pieces. And another thing as well, like they're making an investment decision in you too. So everybody that you speak to at Antler has somewhat of a say in kind of, your journey and the outcome of that journey. So be very like attentive and keep what am I trying to say? Just kind of like, keep listening to the people there that are trying to support you, no matter who it is in the Antler team, because it all kind of adds up in the end when you really need it, especially like a week out of that final pitch.
Awesome. Thank you both. You both have really knocked it out of the park there. So yeah, Matt, hopefully that answered your question. Again, fall in love with the problem, not the solution. We found this first more than ideal, and we know your solution will, a lot of the cases, the actual solution that we investigated point of IC looks very much different, like 6-12 months after we actually put in that first initial check. So we invest in you, not so much on the idea. Alrighty, Neha, you have a question there. Do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question directly?
Thanks, Nate and Kshitija. I think what I'm trying to understand is, what are the resources available during the cohort and the resident choice? Because for me, I've started my own business. I'm on that path. I have a problem that I want to solve. I have kind of a solution, but at the moment, I don't know what the market product fit is. So I'm trying to understand what sort of resources are available during the sessions to validate if this product or if the problem is even real, or if it's just one person who's having it, or as opposed to a wide range of people. Is that something that resource can be provided, or that's something we have to do on our own?
I'd say,
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, sorry, Nate, you go on. Maybe I'll chime in
sorry.
after.
No, I was just going to say, I think you'd probably get guidance from the team on how to go about doing it, I guess. But like at the end of the day, like there's crazy stories about how Antler people have validated their problem space, like a proper hustling stories. Like I remember even us, it was like we got feedback 2 days before one of our pitches that was like, this isn't validated enough. So I walked up and down Collingwood and Brunswick and Richmond for like 2 days straight, just door knocking on vintage store owners' shops and even asking randoms in the street, just to kind of get that last bit. But there's even like, I can't remember the exact example, but there's some like crazy stories about people have just gone out of their way and validated during like COVID and things like that. So you get guidance, but I wouldn't say that you're going to get given the validation, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I
Katie,
was going to say, so product market fit, right? Like it can take 2-3 years for you to actually get product market fit. And
if you're lucky.
And the only people that can give you that validation are your customers, because are they willing to pay for what you're giving them? No one else in the world can actually give you that sort of validation and confidence. And maybe in terms of the question about resources, there's more than you can read, and there's more people than you can talk to, because they'll connect you with experts and everything. So you'll have access to all of that. In terms of like, to Nate's point, you'll have like the validation process is ongoing. Like we're still doing it. You know what I mean? Like every time you build something, you want to test it. Every time you're building a significant feature, you're constantly going to do that. As you go to different segments with your customers, you will have to test pricing again, and then it's not a 3-month journey to find product market fit, is what I wanted to say. So you'll have heaps of resources, but I think and it's different for different people. I'm not a very content person, so I get a lot out of like talking to people and tapping into people's intellectual capability. So I ask a lot of questions. And so it does give you a bit of structure, I suppose, in what things to look for, but not the answer. Rani?
Yeah, no, again, both of you have knocked it out of the park. I don't think I have anything more to add on top of that, and really conscious of time. But Neha, hopefully that answer your question.
No, it sounds good. Thank you. I appreciate the time.
Awesome. Maybe we have time for one more quick rapid fire question, if you have any from the floor. And yeah, Karen.
Hello. Hi, everyone. Thank you for, all of the really great advice that you've been giving. It's really cool to hear both your stories and how you got to where you are. I guess my question, and apologies if it's sort of mildly being answered, I'm just trying to clarify, which is I'm at a point where I've found my co-founders and we are starting to build our MVP. It sounds like that Antler accepts people from probably more earlier stages before they find co-founders, but obviously accept people maybe a bit further along. I'm just trying to understand in my situation, what does the 3-month residency sort of look like if you already have a fairly good concept and you've sort of got a fairly good design and you're starting to build. So what does that 3-month sort of look like for someone in that case?
Sure. Thank you for your question, Karen. Again, we don't rule out sort of like early stage team. Actually, a lot of people come in with a team already and they've already started building, but we do accept sort of like pre-revenue sort of teams that are still early on in their journey. So they still have that gap in that early stage for them to fill. in this case for you, maybe it's not so much the co-founder bit because you found your co-founder, but you can always spend that time with us to actually sort of like refine your validation, actually spend time building, validating, this support system that we've built. So you build alongside other people as well, and you have access to actually office hours and Antler's expertise. So again, basically continue building with us. It's gonna look the same in terms of like you have your first sort of like opportunity to actually check out at week 5. And then if it's a yes, then you continue building in due diligence phase. It's still gonna take 10 to 12 weeks to actually get to IC. But if we think about it, 10 to 12 weeks is not that long at all. It's basically you continue building with us as part of the residency. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yes, thank you so much.
Awesome. So we're almost at time. Hopefully we covered all the questions there in the chat box. Liam, did we miss anything? Did we answer all of those questions in
we're
the
all
chat
good.
box?
No,
We're
I'll
all
be on
good?
top of it. Don't worry.
Awesome. Liam is a legend. Gotcha. Well, maybe one more question to wrap it up. Nate, Katie, a lot of people here in this call are thinking to actually take that leap and build with Antler. If you could actually think back when you start your journey, what are your advice? What is one advice to these people still on the fence to take their leap to entrepreneurship?
You want to go first, Katie?
Sure. I have so much advice. We'll have to do one more session for it. But
Okay, top 3.
Sorry?
Top 3 advices.
3? Okay, great. So the first one I think I would say is the best time to start solving or building what you love was when you first started thinking about it. My only regret is that I didn't start sooner, right? So the next best time is now. You have to start to know whether it's going to work. And Antler gives you enough structure for you to feel a little bit safe in the beginning. The second is you have to have a high appetite for risk and rejection. And the third one would be consistency. Like, Nate gave that example of how he had this weekend where it was really hard. You're going to have that a lot. So you have to keep showing up. So those are the sort of things you have to be prepared for. But also, if you don't give it a go, you don't know. So.
Thank you, Katie. Basically, give it a go now.
I would say, like I wouldn't be looking at it like a 3-month residency because like we got the funding and you're excited for like 1 minute and then you realize that you have to execute on everything that you've been saying and kind of engage new investors. And like we're in the middle of a funding round now, and I'd say it's equally as stressful, if not a lot more stressful than the Antler thing, which I thought was the most stressful thing I'd ever been through. So like you got to kind of be up for the next, like as Katie says, 7 to 10 years of like struggle, risk appetite, rock bottom, roller coaster. Don't want to scare you away, but like just the reality, right? Like it's not 3 months, then you're done and you can just run a successful business and hire 50 people. It's like a proper grind after that. And I think the fun actually starts when you get out of the residency and you're like, you're on your own and you're kind of making your way in the world type thing. So yeah, just like I wouldn't think of it as just this 3-month program that you apply for. It's much, much more than that. Would be my kind of bit of advice.
Thank you, Nate, for that reality slap there. Thank you both. But again, with Antler, as Nate has touched, entrepreneurship journey is very difficult. It is a marathon journey. It's a long, long one. We at Antler here, we're here to build a support system for you to actually de-risk that start of entrepreneurship journey as much as possible through the support system and the residency and the operationalized investment terms that we have actually built for you. So for those of you who haven't started your applications, we are open for applications. Next residency kicks off next February. We've sent in a link there in the chat box for you to start your application sooner than later. So that's a wrap. Thank you, Katie. Thank you, Nate, for joining us today. So much nuggets there that you both have shared. Thank you as well for everyone for tuning in. And we have more AMAs coming up. So if you'd like to hear more from other founders, please feel free to register for our upcoming ones. But for now, it's see you later and see you soon, hopefully in the application process. Thank you, everyone. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody. Great session.
Thank you.
Bye, guys. See you soon.
See you soon.